Have you ever felt like you're living on autopilot as if something essential is missing? You wake up, work, fulfill obligations, but deep down, you feel an emptiness you can't explain. Many people go through life trying to fit in, following paths they never truly chose without ever asking themselves, who am I really? And this is the crucial point. Real life doesn't begin when you land a good job, a relationship, or financial stability. It begins when you find yourself. The problem is that no one teaches us to look within. We are trained to meet expectations, to live up to what others expect from us, and in doing so, we accumulate labels and roles without questioning whether they truly make sense. But there comes a moment when the discomfort grows, something inside us screams for authenticity. And at that moment, a choice arises: continue ignoring it or finally embark on the most important journey of all, the journey to yourself. Finding yourself is not a single event, it's a process. It's about questioning old beliefs, letting go of what no longer serves you, recognizing your own shadows, and integrating all parts of your being. And when that happens, everything changes, decisions become clearer, relationships more genuine, and life takes on a new meaning. Letting go of who the world expects you to be and embracing who you truly are isn't easy, but it's liberating. In this video, we'll explore this journey of self-discovery, understanding how psychology, archetypes, and the unconscious influence this process, and most importantly, how you can take the first step toward finally living a life that makes sense to you. So, if you feel lost or that there's something more waiting for you, stay with me. Perhaps the answer you've been searching for is closer than you think. The search for the true self is a challenge that spans generations. Since childhood, we are shaped by external expectations, imposed beliefs, and social patterns that distance us from our essence. But who are we beyond the masks we wear? The answer isn't outside, it's within. The self is that authentic identity that pulses inside us, waiting to be discovered. However, finding it requires courage, a willingness to question absolute truths, and a commitment to self-awareness. The path of individuation, a concept from Jung, is this journey back to oneself. Unlike simply adapting to the world, it's about integrating all aspects of being: light and shadow, reason and emotion. It's a process that requires looking inward, confronting fears, and recognizing that authenticity is not built by pleasing others, but by embracing your own truth. It's not a fixed destination but a continuous movement of evolution and discovery. Often, the fear of rejection makes us neglect who we really are. We create convenient versions of ourselves to fit into predefined molds. However, living to be accepted comes at a high price, abandoning our own essence. The true self doesn't reveal itself in the noise of external approval but in the silence of self-acceptance. It emerges when we stop fighting against ourselves and learn to embrace all our complexities. Individuation is not an easy process, but it is liberating. It requires going through internal storms, questioning limiting narratives, and letting go of what no longer serves us. But in the end, what we gain is invaluable: a life aligned with who we truly are. And when that happens, everything changes: choices, relationships, and the way we see the world. After all, life only truly begins when we find ourselves. Self-knowledge is not a luxury but a necessity. Those who don't know themselves live on autopilot, repeating patterns without understanding why. The process of individuation, as described by Jung, is this deep dive into one's own psyche to integrate all facets of being. It's not just about discovering strengths but also recognizing weaknesses, insecurities, and repressed desires. It's an invitation to radical honesty with oneself, a continuous process of internal refinement. The human psyche is a mosaic of opposing forces: reason and emotion, courage and fear, light and shadow. Integrating them means accepting that no one is entirely good or bad, strong or weak. Everyone carries contradictions, and instead of denying them, the path of individuation proposes understanding and harmonizing them. When we deny parts of ourselves, they don't disappear. They simply manifest in unconscious ways, often sabotaging our actions. The challenge is to look within without fear. Recognizing fears doesn't make us weak, just as accepting our strengths doesn't make us arrogant. The more we know ourselves, the freer we become to act with authenticity. We are not prisoners of circumstances, we are the architects of our own journey. And to build a life aligned with our essence, we must first know who we are. Individuation has no endpoint, it is a constant journey of evolution. At every stage of life, new aspects emerge and need to be understood. The deeper we go, the more we realize that true freedom comes from fully accepting who we are, with all our dualities. Self-knowledge is the first step toward this integration, and through it we find peace and meaning in existence. The human mind is not an isolated island but an ocean connected by invisible currents. The collective unconscious, a central concept in Jungian psychology, reveals that within each individual live stories, symbols, and patterns inherited from humanity. Our fears, dreams, and intuitions don't arise from nowhere, they are echoes of an ancestral memory that spans generations. This deep layer of the psyche influences choices, perceptions, and behaviors, often without us realizing it. Archetypes are the primal images of this shared unconscious. The hero, the sage, the shadow, the mother, all these characters live within us and shape how we interpret reality. We don't choose these symbols, but we are guided by them. When someone feels called to overcome challenges, they are activating the hero archetype. When they seek answers within, they give voice to the sage. These patterns act as invisible compasses directing our growth. Denying this influence would be like trying to swim against the current. Instead, the key is to recognize and understand these symbols so we can use them to our advantage. Why do certain types of stories move us more? Why do we repeat emotional cycles without understanding why? Many of these answers lie in the archetypes we carry. When we become aware of them, we gain greater control over our actions rather than simply reacting instinctively. The beauty of the collective unconscious lies in its universality. It shows us that despite cultural and individual differences, we all share a common essence. The fear of the unknown, the search for belonging, the desire for fulfillment, all of this is part of a greater story, written long before we were born. Understanding these patterns not only illuminates who we are but also connects us to the deepest aspects of the human experience. Everyone carries within them a hidden face, a side they would rather not admit. This is the shadow, the fears, impulses, and repressed desires that have been denied throughout life. Society teaches us to show only what is acceptable, pushing everything we consider shameful or inappropriate into the unconscious. But what we ignore does not disappear. On the contrary, it manifests in impulsive behaviors, harsh judgments, and disproportionate reactions. Integrating the shadow does not mean giving in to our most primal instincts but recognizing them so they do not control us. Often, what we reject in ourselves are misunderstood qualities. Anger can be transformed into assertiveness, fear into caution, vanity into self-esteem. The problem is never feeling something but ignoring what we feel. When we accept our contradictions, we stop being prisoners of our own emotions. Projection is one of the most common mechanisms of the shadow. What we condemn in others is often a reflection of what we deny in ourselves. Judging someone excessively can be a sign that, deep down, we carry the same trait. Instead of pointing fingers, true growth happens when we use these discomforts as mirrors, asking, "What does this reveal about me?" The answer may be uncomfortable, but it is an essential step toward transformation. Accepting the shadow is an act of courage. It involves looking at ourselves without filters, without masks, and understanding that to be human is to be imperfect. Those who avoid this process remain trapped in repetitive patterns, always fighting against parts of themselves. But those who embark on this journey find a new level of freedom, the freedom to be whole without fear of their own depth. After all, light and shadow are not enemies. Together they form the totality of the self. Archetypes are invisible forces that influence our choices, reactions, and perceptions. They are universal patterns of the psyche, inherited images that shape how we live and interpret the world. Since ancient times, the hero, the sage, the shadow, and many other archetypes have populated myths, stories, and even our daily experiences. They are not just abstract concepts but internal guides that shape our journey and define how we face challenges. Each archetype emerges at specific moments in life. The hero arises when we face difficulties and need courage. The caregiver manifests in our compassion for others. The sage appears when we seek knowledge and reflection. The problem arises when we fixate on a single archetype, ignoring other aspects of our psyche. A rigid identity limits our growth, preventing us from exploring new possibilities and evolving fully. Understanding archetypes can be a powerful tool for self-awareness. By recognizing which archetype dominates our life, we can balance it with others. If someone identifies only as a warrior, for example, they may be neglecting the sensitivity of the lover or the vision of the sage. The key is to acknowledge these influences and use them consciously instead of being controlled by them unconsciously. Archetypes are like internal maps that help us navigate life. The more we connect with these symbols, the better we understand our motivations, patterns, and challenges. After all, we are not fixed characters in a predetermined story. We have the ability to integrate different aspects of ourselves and write our own destiny. Understanding archetypes is learning to dance with our own psyche, finding balance among the multiple roles we play. Nothing happens by chance, or does it? Synchronicity, a concept developed by Jung, suggests that certain events carry a deeper meaning than they seem. These are coincidences so improbable and symbolic that they feel like messages from the universe, invisible bridges connecting our inner world to external reality. Who has never thought of someone and suddenly received a message from them? Or stumbled upon exactly the book they needed at the right moment? The rational mind tends to ignore these signs, dismissing them as mere coincidences. However, synchronicity invites us to look beyond linear logic, recognizing subtle connections between seemingly unrelated events. When we open our eyes to these patterns, we begin to notice that life whispers directions, offering clues about our path. Perhaps chance is just an illusion, maybe there is an invisible thread connecting everything we experience. More than coincidences, these moments can reveal our alignment with our personal journey. When we are on the right path, unexpected doors open. People appear at the exact moment we need them, and opportunities arise as if they were waiting for us. This does not mean that life is preordained, but rather that there is a natural flow of events that favors those who listen to their intuition and follow what makes sense to their essence. Synchronicity teaches us to trust in the mystery of existence. Instead of trying to control everything obsessively, we can learn to recognize the signs and flow with life. Purpose is not something fixed that must be desperately discovered but something that reveals itself gradually through experience. The question is not whether these signs exist, but whether we are attentive enough to see them. Dreams are windows into the unconscious, portals that connect us with hidden parts of ourselves. During sleep, the rational mind quiets down, and the unconscious takes control, communicating through symbols, metaphors, and enigmatic narratives. Every image, scenario, or character in a dream can carry a profound meaning, revealing fears, desires, or messages that the waking consciousness often ignores. Contrary to what many believe, dreams are not just meaningless fantasies. Jung believed that they function as internal guides, helping us understand conflicts, integrate repressed emotions, and even find solutions to real-life challenges. A recurring dream, for example, may be an invitation to face something we have been avoiding. Ignoring them is like refusing a letter written by our own psyche, containing valuable answers. Dream interpretation does not follow rigid formulas, as symbols vary according to each person's experience. However, there are universal patterns that appear across most cultures. A house may represent the inner self, water can symbolize deep emotions, and the figure of the wise old man may indicate wisdom emerging from the unconscious. The key is to develop an active awareness of these messages and seek associations that make sense for one's own journey. Keeping a dream journal can be a first step in deciphering them. Writing down dreams helps identify recurring patterns and symbols, bringing greater clarity about what the mind is trying to communicate. When we learn to listen to our dreams, we gain an internal compass to navigate life with more awareness and depth. After all, the unconscious always speaks. The question is whether we are willing to listen. Spirituality does not have to be tied to religious dogma. It can be understood as the search for meaning and connection with something greater than the ego. Jung saw spirituality as an essential aspect of the human psyche, a path to integrating the totality of the self. The journey of self-discovery is not limited to the rational mind. It requires a dive into the depths of the unconscious, where symbols, archetypes, and mystical experiences play a fundamental role. Throughout history, various spiritual traditions have described internal transformation processes similar to Jungian individuation. The retreat into the desert, the encounter with the shadow, the symbolic death of the ego, and the rebirth are themes present both in mythologies and in profound psychological experiences. These moments of crisis and awakening often mark important transitions in personal journeys, opening space for a new level of consciousness. In the modern world, where rationality dominates and the sacred is often neglected, many people feel an existential void. This disconnection can lead to feelings of anxiety, alienation, and a lack of purpose. However, reconnecting with the spiritual side does not mean merely following a specific belief but cultivating a deeper relationship with oneself and life. It can be through meditation, contemplation of nature, art, or even the simple act of being present. Psychology and spirituality are not opposites. In fact, when combined, they offer a powerful path to transformation. True evolution occurs when an individual can balance reason and intuition, science and mystery, action and contemplation. Personal growth is not just about understanding the mind but also about nurturing the soul. In the end, the spiritual quest is not about finding absolute answers but about asking the right questions. From an early age, we learn to wear masks to fit into the world. There is the mask of the competent professional, the always available friend, the exemplary child, all created to meet expectations and avoid rejection. While necessary in certain contexts, these personas can become prisons when they distance us from who we truly are. The question is, to what extent do the roles we play reflect our essence or merely the image we want to project? Society teaches us to value external approval, and we often sacrifice our authenticity for acceptance. We smile when we want to cry, agree when we want to disagree, follow paths that are not truly ours. But living only to meet others' expectations is a heavy burden. Over time, this disconnection leads to dissatisfaction, anxiety, and the feeling that something essential is missing because, in fact, it is. The challenge is to balance the need for adaptation with authenticity. Instead of living exclusively through masks, we must find moments to express our true selves. This might mean saying no without guilt, pursuing what truly makes sense, or simply allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. The more we know ourselves, the more we realize that we do not need so many layers to be accepted. Those who truly matter value truth, not appearances. Removing masks does not mean abandoning social roles but using them consciously, without letting them define us completely. The authentic person is not the one who rejects all conventions but the one who can be themselves, regardless of the environment. In the end, freedom is not about pleasing everyone but about living aligned with one's truth. After all, what is the point of being loved for what you pretend to be if it means losing who you really are? Life always presents us with challenges, some small, others enormous. Instead of seeing them as obstacles, we can view them as invitations for transformation. Every difficulty carries a lesson. Every crisis brings an opportunity for growth. The problem is that we often resist these changes, clinging to what is familiar, even when it no longer serves us. But the truth is that transformation only happens when we accept crossing into the unknown. The call for change is not always gentle. It may come in the form of a loss, a failure, or a deep dissatisfaction that refuses to be ignored. These are the moments that pull us out of autopilot and force us to look within. Discomfort is a sign that something needs to be re-evaluated, and resistance only prolongs the suffering. What is life trying to teach us when everything seems to be going wrong? Often the answer is not outside but within. Transformation does not mean becoming someone else but revealing who has always been there, beneath layers of fear, limiting beliefs, and external expectations. It means letting go of what no longer resonates and embracing new possibilities. It could be a career change, a new lifestyle, or simply a new way of seeing the world. What matters is understanding that growth is painful, but staying stagnant is even more so. The journey to becoming who you truly are requires courage, but it also brings invaluable rewards. Every challenge overcome makes us stronger. Every internal discovery brings us closer to our purpose. In the end, it is not about reaching a specific destination but about living more authentically and consciously. Life does not wait, and every day is a new chance for transformation. The only question is, are we willing to answer the call? True freedom is not in following a pre-written script but in having the courage to write our own story. Finding oneself is a challenging process, but it is also the only path to an authentic and purposeful life. Those who truly know themselves make more aligned decisions, build more meaningful relationships, and live without the constant need for external validation. After all, what is the point of pleasing the whole world if, in the end, you no longer recognize yourself? Every challenge, every crisis, every moment of doubt is an invitation to look within and ask, am I living my truth or just fulfilling expectations? The answer to this question can change everything. The world does not need more people trying to fit in, it needs more people living with authenticity. And that starts with one simple step: the commitment to discovering yourself without fear of what you might find. If this video resonated with you, if it brought reflections or that little push you needed, take this moment to take a step toward your journey of self-discovery. Start small, question your choices, observe your patterns, listen to your intuition. Transformation does not happen all at once but with every decision that brings you closer to who you truly are. And if you want to continue this journey with me, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here we are always exploring topics that help you live with more awareness and purpose. Because life truly begins when you find yourself.